everybody, it's Ken Kmet, condovoice.com. Thanks for joining me today. Today, I want to talk about dollars and cents that are going to be coming out of your pocket in the next year or two or three or whatever, if you live in a condo or an HOA in the state of Florida, and if you're going to be affected by the SB 4D or the Florida Building Safety Law, or this year's SB 154, which is the current bill in the Florida legislature, making its way through into law, pretty much into law. Okay, it's almost there. And what all that is going to cost you. So everyone wants to know, okay, they want to try to understand the law, but they also want to know, okay, what's this going to cost me? So nobody's talking about the cost of this thing. And, you know, being in the industry for so long and having managed condos and HOAs for over 40 years, I know these things. I know what these things cost. So let me take my best shot at this and share with you a spreadsheet that I made up that should illustrate to you what you're going to wind up paying. All right, you're a condo association and you individually, you're part of the overall cost of your condo. Once again, if you've got to comply with this law, there's a lot of condos and HOAs that are not going to have to comply because they're not 3 stories or higher. They don't have structural issues. But some of SB 154, this bill this year, is going to affect you in terms of overall reserves. Okay. So, and really the reserves is kind of the thing here. This is the thing that's going to elevate the cost of all of this. So let me get right into it here. Let me share with you the spreadsheet. I'm going to take you through different scenarios. And we're just going to, let me just share my screen here. There we go. Okay, there we are. So there we are. There I am. Let's do this. Okay. So here's the assumption. This is a typical 50-unit condominium association. It's a mid-rise coastal property, which means it's likely going to have to comply with SB 4D and its children or its amendments or whatever they come up with. This also allows for a 40% increase, which is the average I'm hearing in insurance renewals across the state. So even though we've got a construction issue with these buildings that we don't want them to collapse, we have an insurance issue, okay, because we have insurance companies that are saying, hey, we don't know what we have here. We don't know the condition of these buildings. How can we ascertain our risk? So they're concerned, and rightly so. So anyway, I want to take you through a quick budget here. So I came up with $388,662, and here's how I got there. These are, in my experience, managing a lot of different condos and HOAs. I took like an average case. I took like typicals, and I just took a few liberties and said, okay, let me come up with a number. Here's the number. So we got $4K in admin. We're paying $65K per 50-unit building now. Let's just say it's going to be $91,000. So that's a pretty hefty increase. The percentage is what the percentage is for that line item for the entire budget. So not percentage increase, but that way. Management fee, by the way, let me just say, there's another bill passing through the legislature that has to do with increasing the liability for being a board member and a property manager. And if you're going to increase the liability and increase the scale to which you can be held accountable, you're going to have to pay more money to management companies because they're going to have to get better insurance. And that insurance costs to them is going to get passed on to their clients. So I don't know what that's going to cost because we're not there yet and it's not actually a law yet. But I can tell you that it's not going to be cheap because the same thing is going to happen. Okay. The market has to adjust. All right, so if you change the law, you change the industry. So you got the condo HOA management industry. They're going to say, okay, Chubb is a big insurer. There's a lot of other insurers and insure management companies, and they're going to have to come up with a price to say, okay, you want insurance for all this? Great. This is what's going to cost you. So get ready for that increase. When you make changes, it's one thing if you change the one thing you're trying to fix. Okay, it's a whole nother thing when you've got a ripple effect and it just creeps out into the other related services or goods or whatever it is associated with that fix. And those things have costs associated with them too. So there you go. All right. So professional legal, if a lot of condos and HOAs, they don't have a lot of money, put a lot of money in there for that. If they run into a legal issue, they just deal with it. But 5 grand is probably not enough, because with all these changes and all these things you have to do, you might want to consider looking at that line item better this time for next year. We'll see. But I've got 5 grand in there. We've got license fees, building maintenance. Listen, this whole focus on building maintenance, if you haven't put enough money into your regular building maintenance, you need to increase that budget, because these things that fail, it could be a pipe hanger in a parking garage. It could be, I don't know, a small section of railing that just gives way over age. And it's not a huge structural issue, but it's a big enough issue where you've got to allow for that in your operating budget. And so in a typical condo of this size, you might not have $40,000 in building maintenance, but I went ahead and added a few bucks into that one, because I think, as a recommendation, you should look at that line item too and say, you know what, we better pump that up, because we as the building ages, that line item right there is going to go up. Just has to. Exterminating, grounds maintenance, ground supplies, electric, water, sewer, trash. We always got to have a substantial miscellaneous in there. I always say irrigation, property repairs, improvements. Okay, there's a difference to me between property repairs and improvements and regular building maintenance. Building maintenance are small repairs. They can even be cleaning, substantial cleaning projects, things like that. But your repair or improvements are when you're actually getting into, like, I don't know, a wooden staircase that has to have all of the treads replaced or something because they've just gotten rotted out or something like that. Or a remedial painting project where you don't have to paint the whole place, but you got to do a lot of painting to keep it up, stuff like that. We got janitorial, elevator, swimming pool, and maintenance labor. Most a condo of this size would at least have one full-time maintenance man, I would say, on staff. Okay, so this is assuming no reserves. So this particular condo has waived their reserves in the past, always has, always will, because in the past, it's been a pretty easy vote to get. Let's talk about that for a second. So condo laws, chapter 718, and in a lot of condo docs themselves, they'll have a provision where the state requires fully funded reserves for all items, roof, paving, and painting, but anything over $10,000 at replacement time. If a thing like an elevator is definitely going to be over $10,000, but it's got a pretty long life to it. So you have a formula. We're going to get into that formula here in a minute on how you calculate your reserves. But so we've got roof, painting, and paving. And we're just saying that these people, all right, the reserve vote is, you have to get a quorum. So in a 50-unit condo, you've got 26 people would get a quorum. So you can have an official meeting and you can conduct business. Within that meeting, to waive the reserves, you've got to get a majority of that 26, okay, in favor of waiving the state mandatory fully funded reserves, in the sense that when you get that approval, okay, now you can fund it at any level you want, 75%, half, 25, or nothing. And, sad to say, a lot of condos go nothing because they want to keep that maintenance fee low for a lot of reasons, okay? And it's a whole nother video to explain if you don't already know. If you're living in a condo, okay? You don't want the condo association to have your individual money until they really need it. Okay. You'd rather keep that money and buy something with it or invest it or do whatever. Because in a condo association and an HOA, when you give them the money to put into a reserve or something else, that money just sits there. I mean, you could do a CD, you could do a couple of things to try and earn some interest on it. But from an investment point of view, okay, it's kind of dead money. It just sits there. Whereas if it was in your pocket, you might be able to make 5 or 10% on it. And then when it comes time to actually paying for something 2 or 3 years down the road or 5 years down the road, you do a special assessment and then you give them the money. In the meantime, you've had that money to invest and make or lose money with it. At least you have that freedom and that authority over your money at that point. Once you fund these reserves and that money goes into the condo association, you're not getting it back. Okay, they're going to use it for that intended purpose. Now, so I'm just saying $650 a month. That's probably going to be maybe conservative. There's probably a lot of condos on the beach that don't fund the reserves that have a higher fee than that because they choose to have a higher fee than that. All right, so we're going to slide over to scenario number 2. 50-unit condo, 35 years old, with 3 basic reserves. All right, you got your same situation here. I'm not going to go over the budget again, and we've added in the reserves here. You can see that right there. So we've got a increase in that condo of $301.39 per month, or we've elevated it now to $950 a month. So you've gone from 648 to 950, and that's only funding the 3 basic reserves. That's not elevators, seawall, security systems, and the like. Now we're going to roll over to scenario number 3. Here we go. So typical 50-unit condo, 35 years or older, and with basic reserves plus. I call that a plus. This is no SIRS, no concrete restoration. So we're going to get into that in a second, but this is not factoring in any big, huge building restoration project. This is stuff that's expected that you can put your hands on, your fingers on, you have easy access to, and you have current knowledge of. All right, like a roof. You know what a roof costs to replace. So anyway, we've elevated our total maintenance fees, total budget income to $662,300. All of these items are the same, except we've added inspection 1 and inspection 2. And we did that on the last budget. Sorry, I added that in there because you got to have your phase 1 inspection, and you might as well just factor in your phase 2, because chances are if you've got a building that's 25, 30, 35 years old and it's never had an inspection done, and you're going to do a phase 1 inspection, are you telling me, are you living in some different planet? So you're telling me that somebody that's qualified to do this, by the way, is not going to say, hey, we've got some problems, we need to go look inside somewhere. Okay. And then once you start looking in somewhere, you've opened up Pandora's box. You got to look everywhere. And that's what they're going to do. This is what's going to cost you. Phase 1, for my money, doesn't happen without a phase 2. So you got phase 1, phase 2 inspections, and that's probably going to be a pretty good number there, 17.5 and 70,000. I mean, folks, it ain't getting any cheaper. That's for sure. All right. So I've added additional reserves. I got elevator, I got swimming pool, I got seawall, I got fire sprinklers, I got life safety systems, and I got security systems. So here's our number, $1,100 a month. That's an increase of 41% over our original scenario, where we've got no reserves, no funding of reserves, that kind of thing. So $1,100 a month, folks. That's where you're heading. So if you're used to paying 600 or 650, you're looking at doubling that. All right. It's near going to be double. All right. Let's talk about reserves. All right. Here's our reserve schedule. All right. So we got roof. Excuse me. Okay. So here's what we do. We take our beginning balance. We're going to assume that's 0, but you're probably going to have some balance in there. And got the year wrong there. I'm just going to change that right now as I speak. That's going to be at the end of 23, not 22. Useful life. I'm going to say the roof has 25 total years. Okay, let's just say you had a shingle roof, 25-year shingle roof in Florida. You might get 25 years out of it. Expected useful life. That's what that is. Then you have somebody take a look at it that knows what they're talking about, and you say, okay, what do I got left? Okay, so we're going to assume you got 15 years left on it, a little bit more than half. So, and the replacement cost for that roof is $500,000. So if I'm going to fund that $500,000 over a 15-year period, that becomes, okay, and plus there's the formula, I'll just show it to you. And that becomes the resulting number, because I've got to add in my balance. If I did have a balance, that balance would come away. Okay, so I'm going to subtract the cost of replacement minus the balance I have toward that liability, and then I'm going to divide that by this right here, the number of remaining years left, and that gives me $33,333. That's the amount that needs to be funded for the next year. Okay. So this right here is, I've got that number, 33,333. That is that number divided by 50 divided by 12. Okay, there's 50 units and there's 12 months in a year. And that gives me my cost per unit for that reserve line item, 56 bucks. So that's going to cost a homeowner in that 50 unit condo to fund the current reserve liability for the next year, $56 a month. That's what it is. So what you do then, you do that for each reserve item you have, and you come up with a total. And the total for this particular condo would be $416 per unit per month to fund the current next year's liability of $249,333. That's for all of these items. And let me just say, swimming pool, elevator, seawalls, fire sprinklers, life safety, security, you're going to have, every condo is different. And you're going to have probably, seriously, probably an item in there that you're going to throw in there. You're going to say, well, that would cost over $10,000. So that's what the law says, and that's what you need to do. Now, I'm going to go down to here, and then we're going to talk about that law. So we have this right here. So you've got your SIRS, which is your structural integrity reserve study. All right. So you got to have a reserve study done. You got to have a structural integrity reserve study. So you have that done, and they say, you know what? These are things you need to get done. Okay. So let's just say you got $300,000 worth of stuff that's got to get repaired. And it's not major restoration, but it's stuff you got to get done. Then in phase two, you're going to have the resulting SIRS mandated structural repairs. Engineer says, this is what's wrong. You got to do this. And this is a rough idea what it's costs. And I'm just telling you that, you can bet it's going to be about $5 million for a 50 unit condo. So if you break that down again, adding our formulas in per unit, whatever, you've got, it's going to cost you, this is per unit. So a one-time special assessment to fund these two items is going to cost each homeowner $172,000. And you know what? In a previous video I'm saying this is going to cost, if I added in all the costs working it the other way, all right, I came up between 150 and 200,000 per unit. That's reality, folks. That's what I think this thing is going to cost. So now, the law in voting down and waiving these reserves, and you can see, here's the thing. You can have reserves, you can have partial reserves, you can have more reserves than you need, you can have less reserves than you need, but you got to get the vote. And what they did in SB 154 for this year, I'm not sure when it's going to be. I don't know what the effective date is. It's either going to be July 1 or October 1, probably. But instead of getting the, and I don't think I mentioned this earlier, so I'm going to make sure, so I'm going to just roll with this thing and mention it now. Instead of getting a quorum in a 50 unit, which is 26, and instead of getting majority of that quorum, okay, you've got, what is that? That's probably going to be, I'm thinking 13 or 14 units. Anyway, that's all it would take normally to waive reserves. That's why waiving reserves is so easy. Because really, you could have half the people in that condo be somewhat apathetic toward everything. And if your fees are going to stay the same or get lowered, if I'm an investor, I'm not showing up. Okay. But if you say your fees are going to go up, that room is going to fill up. And when you send out those proxies or limited proxies for these agenda items, for these votes to waive reserves, you know what? And you say, if you don't waive this reserve, our fees are going to go from $650 to $1,100. Guess what? You're going to get a lot of people responding. So the legislature said, okay, we don't want this same Champlain Towers thing to happen. We don't want 98 people dying or more. We don't want buildings collapsing, whatever. So their remedy, their fix, not mine, their fix on the vote regime here is to increase the vote required to waive the reserves from what I just explained, which is a majority of all the owners and then a majority of that group, to half a majority of all the owners, which is 50%, 51%, which in this case, in a 50 unit condo, instead of taking I don't know, 13, 14 people to waive the reserves. It's going to take 26. Now, here's what I got to say about that. Do the math. If I'm going to elevate fees double, okay, than what they're used to historically. Let's say this condo's been around for 30 years and they've never had reserves. Okay, they've always done a few little special assessments, never really done anything big. And you're going to double the maintenance fees. People are going to, again, come out of the woodwork. They're going to get involved. They're going to get less apathetic. They're going to say, what are you talking about? Are you crazy? So, and they're going to want to get that justified. They're going to say, why? Because they've never been involved. They don't know. Haven't been keeping track of the statutes or nothing, or what's going on in your own condo. And they're going to say, what happened? Well, you're going to tell them, okay, well, we got this new law. We got to fund these reserves. And this is what they said. Unless we have this vote, that's what the fees are going to go to. And in my mailer, with the meeting notice of these meetings, if I was, if I'm you, I am definitely putting a cover page on here saying, explaining all this. All right. So you can have full disclosure saying, look, this isn't us. This is the way it's got to be. So do you think that if they're going to revolt against the increase in this fee, that they're not going to give you their proxy to waive it? Of course they are. So the leap, this big hurdle now that's in the way of waiving these reserves because it's being looked at as being derelict. Okay, so it's not setting aside reserves for these big building restoration projects. And part of the problem with Champlain Towers that we've read about publicly is that the people kept putting this off. They had an engineer tell them in 2018, hey, you got major problems. And the biggest problem was, or one of the big problems for the board and membership was to get the money up to do this, to assess the owners. Well, here's what's happening. The state is saying, okay, let's do this. Well, they didn't take this bar high enough, in my opinion, because I can get 26 votes. It's not hard, not with what's at stake. Okay, to get 26 people to vote to change the color of the pool deck, big deal. They're probably not going to vote for that, right? They're not. I'm just not going to get them to respond. But if I tell them it's going to cost them double what they're used to paying, they're going to respond. So it's not a high enough bar to achieve what their intent was. Okay, it just isn't. So a lot of votes within condo law. Okay, if you want to change something and it requires a higher bar, it's either 2/3 vote of all the members, or it's 75% vote of all the members. And I'm talking about things that could just be a substantial change or alteration to the common elements. It could just be changing the color of the building. Change the color of the building, fund building restoration. That could kill people if you don't do it. You know what I'm saying? So to only raise the bar to half of the people in the building to waive reserves, in my mind, is nothing. That's an easy hurdle to get over. If I'm a manager or a board member, or I'm a bunch of homeowners saying, not on my watch, you're not gonna, and they recall the board, they fire the manager, and they say, okay, we're gonna beat this. Okay, well, great. You got 26 people to vote, and wow, now we could keep our maintenance fees down to where they were, which are going up anyway due to cost of living increases and insurance and other stuff. So here you go. We got doubling of maintenance fees. That's going to happen to most condos in this bucket. Okay. And then we've got special assessments coming down the way of, let's just say, 175,000 per unit. Okay. It's going to change. It's going to be plus or minus that big time. And now we've got a law that attempts to make this happen, but the law doesn't go far enough, not near far enough. It doesn't create enough of a hurdle to where if you don't want to fund these reserves, boy, you're going to really have to work at this. You're going to have multiple meetings. You're going to have to campaign. You're going to have to want this bad. Otherwise, you got to have these reserves. You got to have them. And it's a responsible thing to do. It's what you should do. Okay. It's what the law says. It was the intent of the law in the beginning for decades now. Okay. It's just that the lawmakers gave you a way out. Well, they gave you a way out again. So I don't know what we've really accomplished here. It's a lot of fanfare, much ado, and here we go with a vote that's not enough. It's not near enough. There should be 2/3 or 75%. In my opinion, they need to do an amendment. If they need to, call a special session, because when this hits the streets, and this video is going to hit the street, and people are going to realize, oh, well, okay, that's not such a big deal. We'll just get ready for it. We don't want to have to fund this reserve the way the state tells us. We'll still go get our money if we need to from the people. We have confidence in our collections. We want to be able to have self-control and authority over our own stuff. And we just don't want to have to fund these reserves at these levels. Okay. So anyway, that's what's going on here. Hope you enjoyed the video. Come on down to condomvoice.com. Come and see us. Send us questions. We're really here to help, and we'd love to help you. You and your condo association or HOA, whatever your question is, send it over. We'll give you a reply. So anyway, that's it. So wanted to illustrate all this to you guys. I hope you've learned something, especially on the reserves. A lot of people haven't ever really taken a class on how reserves are calculated. So I hope you've seen this spreadsheet and I've explained it enough to you where you can say, oh, okay, I can calculate my own reserves. Now, one thing I want to say, so most of the time, condos and HOAs, they throw a number on these reserves of expected life, which requires somebody who really knows what they're doing to look at this item, like to look at a roof shingle and tell how long it's got left. Okay. And to also know what the current rate of replacement is, like today, not 10 years from now, but today, so that you can put a decent number on that. I mean, you can't just throw a number out there. And, some condos and HOAs will just call a contractor and get a bid. And, that might be okay, but that bid's not going to give you the remaining life. So you really do need a reserve specialist to help you through this, or a consultant of some kind to do this, or you need to pay a tradesperson. Pay them. You say, look, I've got to have this exact number and this exact thing and the expected life, and I need you to test that shingle, and I need you to give a expert opinion about those things, so that this reserve schedule, it'd be real, it'll be responsible, it'll be, oh my goodness, more fiduciary on your part, and so that it just can't be questioned, and that's really what you want. And to be honest, you don't want to have to do a special assessment when it comes time to replace that roof. You need, the ideal is hit that target. The only way you can hit that target, it's garbage in, garbage out. You got to have somebody that knows what they're doing. I can tell you what that reserve line item should be. Okay. And then you can budget accordingly. All right. Well, that's it for this video. Come on down to condomvoice.com. Thanks for watching. You all have a blessed day.